Hello, and welcome to Replay Value. Hyouka's 7th episode hits you with thematic importance right at the very beginning, the first shot. On first impression, it appears that a ladybug is chilling out on a leaf, but as the shot continues, we discover that that impression was wrong. The ladybug was hanging on a window, and that combination was a mere illusion. This is a visual example of the quote that makes up the title of this episode. The ghost, when examined, was just withered flowers. And sure enough, episode 7 focuses on examining a supposed ghost. But there is more to this episode than a simple visual trick or an engaging mystery. It's a great character episode for Houtarou and Chitanda, and in the way that Hyouka uses the elements of the mystery to empower its thematic meaning. This is the first episode that I would really say pushes the fact that Houtarou is our frame of reference for the narrative. And what I mean by that is while the mystery and solution visualizations usually come from Houtarou, and there's plenty of his thought process that we're privy to, Hyouka doesn't really require you to think of the narrative as first person. You notice it because it's structured like that, and it'd be a huge departure from the norm of mystery or detective fiction if it wasn't. The original novels are written in first person after all. But fundamentally, you don't have to consider Hotarou's position when watching the previous 6 episodes. Episode 7 goes out of its way to put you in Hotarou's shoes. We get plenty of POV shots, whether something mundane like looking at his shoes or his food, or something a bit more important like the ladybug at the beginning or during Chitanda's check-in. This, in addition to the usual visualizations and thought process lines, and even irregular stuff like his sense of smell and him passing out, all place us firmly in Hotarou's perspective, which is important because this episode plays on that perspective, specifically his belief that all ghosts are just wilted flowers, as he states clearly at the beginning of the episode. Perspective is obviously important. Hell, it's the basis for this mystery. From Mayaka and Chitanda's perspective when they saw a hanging shadow, was that accurate, or will it be proven to have just been a wilted flower? And like all mystery stories, Hotarou's perspective is also what allows us to put together the clues. Seeing a figure heading away from the inn, hearing the drums going off, the visualization of the ghost story, feeling the dampness of the soil, him seeing Rei's name written on practically everything, and in a larger sense, the sisters' interactions. Hotarou's impression of the two's relationship is pretty negative. We see Rei chastise Kaio getting nervous about her sister getting angry at her, Rei's monopolization of Mayaka, and more. As Hotarou's perspective is our perspective, we get a similar sense. And it's easy to attribute Kaio acting like she's on guard constantly to a bad relationship with her older sister. But that perspective is somewhat colored by his own relationship with his sister, which he doesn't think of in a positive light. As he says, having siblings in reality isn't wonderful in the slightest, thinking to himself that Chitanda's positive outlook on the matter is as though she thinks her dreams are true for everyone. Before I continue with that line of thinking, my favorite shot in this episode is that of the birds. Houtarou is explaining his relationship with his sister, that she can be described as an oddball or genius, that Houtarou can't imagine himself being better at anything than she is, though he's never cared to be. That's literally all he says. But the birds tell a few different stories. Firstly, they mimic his siblings aren't that great thought, since either the late bird kicked off the first one, or the first one wanted nothing to do with the latter one. But if you read it as Houtarou and Tomoe are being specifically represented by these birds, the sequence could be that Tomoe is always one step ahead of Houtarou, and leaving him behind even as he starts to catch up, something that seems to be borne out by the Sekitani June arc, as well as some upcoming material. A more conservative reading would suggest that as Tomoe left Kamiyama High, Houtarou came in to fill the gap at the Classics Club, and maybe some other places too. Chitanda and Houtarou exhibit a deeper understanding of each other in this episode, even from small things, like Houtarou suddenly developing a Chitanda level of smell when he deduces cheesecake for dessert, Houtarou accepting that Chitanda is better suited than he is to talk with Kaio, Chitanda giving him space instead of pushing him when he's deep in thought, and of course when she copies his crossed arms pose in an attempt to solve the mystery as well. Houtarou thinks to himself as he's in the hot spring that he can explain the shadow, but he can't figure out the why, which is what Chitanda would actually be curious about. Play this up with some good framing like these two shots, and how Houtarou completely leaves Satoshi out of the loop and suggests not to tell Mayaka, and you have the inverse of the Sekitani June arc, where it's just the two of them. So bringing these threads back together, we arrive at the conclusion of the episode. Houtarou's impression of how siblings behave and his belief that all ghosts are wilted flowers come through as he explains that the hanging shadow was Rei's yukata that Kaio had gotten wet when she went to the festival. Chitanda is upset at the fact that his explanation suggests that the two siblings don't get along, something that goes against her own perspective on how siblings should be. While Chitanda wondered about whether the giant eel existed at the start of the episode, not having a stake in the matter, here, when it comes down to her outlook on people, she does. All of this while underneath a tree that flickers a pattern across her, looking like wilted flowers on her dress and her face, leaving her between Hotarou's perspective and her own. But instead of accepting this perspective, as Houtarou begins to say that siblings don't get along or something similar, she interrupts him and restates her desire for a sibling. She then walks out of the wilted flower pattern, and as Houtarou thinks to himself that her dream was just an illusion, we cut to a shot of a partially eaten flower and a ladybug. Since the wilting flower is symbolic of reality, and the ladybug at the beginning was the key element of the illusion, we have in this moment illusion blending with reality, as we return to see Rei taking care of Kaio. A big smile appears on Chitanda's face, her dream kept intact, and Houtarou says, maybe not just wilted flowers. Hotarou's perspective was challenged, not only his initial belief, but also on how siblings operate. And if the wilted flower is symbolic of Hotarou's perspective, then the ladybug eating at the flower is foreshadowing for this moment, and suggestive of how Hotarou's perspective isn't necessarily a true one. If you need any more proof of that, just look to how he dismisses the shadow hanging over his shoulder as Kaio, without any evidence to back that up. Not to say that it isn't Kaio, but rather that Hotarou's perspective isn't flawless, and that we as an audience should be more aware of his biases as we go through the story. And it goes beyond just this episode, how he views other characters, his opinion on rose-colored life. His perspective is inherently shown on every element in the show. If there is a true reality in Hyouka, we don't find it with Houtarou, but rather somewhere between the light that displayed withered flowers onto a dreaming girl and the illusory ladybug that slowly consumes a set view of reality. Hope you enjoyed. Leave a like and comment with your thoughts, subscribe for more analysis pieces, and follow me on Twitter for updates about future projects, link in the description. We'll be back real soon with another video, but until then, thanks for watching.